The Indian Ocean, a vast expanse of water, has become a hotbed of international tensions. But what if I told you that the real danger isn't just military conflict, but a potential economic meltdown that could affect every single one of us?
Wow, that's a bold statement. Can you elaborate on how tensions in the Indian Ocean could lead to such widespread economic consequences?
Absolutely. You see, the Indian Ocean isn't just a body of water. It's the lifeblood of global trade. The choke points of the Indian Ocean pass through about 80% of the world's maritime oil trade. Any disruption in these choke points could have a significant impact on the global economy, impacting everything from the price of gas at your local pump to the cost of that new smartphone you've been eyeing.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about military posturing between India and Pakistan?
Not at all. While those two countries are key players, we're seeing a much larger geopolitical chess game unfold. The United States, China, and India are all vying for control over what we call sea lines of communication. These are essentially the maritime highways of the world, and whoever controls them has a significant advantage in both economic and strategic terms.
So how are these countries going about asserting their control? I imagine it's not just about having the biggest navy.
You're absolutely correct. The approach is multifaceted. We're seeing massive investments in naval modernization, sure, but it's also about cutting-edge technology. India, for instance, is pouring resources into nuclear-powered submarines, aircraft carriers, and even unmanned underwater vehicles. It's like an arms race, but underwater.
Underwater drones? That sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. How do these actually work in practice?
Well, think of them as the stealth bombers of the sea. These autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs, can operate for extended periods without human intervention. They're used for everything from surveillance to potentially even deploying weapons. The tricky part is, they're incredibly hard to detect, which adds a whole new layer of complexity to maritime security.
That's mind-boggling. With all this advanced tech floating around, what are the risks of something going wrong?
It's this crucial question that keeps military strategists awake at night. The biggest concern is the potential for miscalculation or unintended confrontation. Imagine a scenario where a cyber attack disables one country's surveillance systems. Suddenly, they can't track their neighbor's naval movements. What might be a routine patrol could be misinterpreted as an aggressive action, leading to a rapid escalation of tensions.
That seems like a recipe for catastrophe. Has anything like this happened before?
We've come dangerously close. During the 2019 Pulwama Balakot crisis between India and Pakistan, there was a moment of high tension when India announced that its carrier battle group, including a nuclear-powered submarine, was on a deterrence patrol. Pakistan later reported detecting an Indian submarine within its maritime zone. The lack of transparency around these movements created a situation ripe for misunderstanding.
Yikes. So what's being done to prevent these kinds of dangerous situations from escalating?
That's where the concept of maritime confidence building measures, or CBMs, comes in. These are essentially agreements and protocols designed to reduce the risk of conflict and misunderstanding between nations. There are several proposals on the table, ranging from mutual notification systems for naval activities to standardized rules of engagement for when forces encounter each other at sea.
That sounds promising. Can you give us an example of how one of these CBMs might work in practice?
Sure thing. Let's take the proposal for a submarine rescue agreement as an example. Imagine a scenario where a submarine from country A experiences a critical malfunction and sinks in waters near country B. Without an agreement in place, country B might view any rescue attempts as a potential threat or espionage opportunity. But with a CBM in place, there would be clear protocols for how to handle the situation, allowing for a humanitarian response regardless of political tensions.
That's actually quite heartening. It's a reminder that even in times of tension, there's room for cooperation.
Exactly. And it's not just about feel-good diplomacy. These measures have real-world impacts. Now, let's test your understanding. Can you think of 3 potential benefits of implementing maritime CBMs in the Indian Ocean region? Take a moment to consider.
Well, I'd say the first benefit would be reducing the risk of accidental conflicts. Second, it could lead to better communication between nations. And third, it might foster a more stable environment